They had padlocked the fridge in her own house. The very house she had built with her own hands. The one where she raised her 3 children, who were now slowly killing her, but without touching her. It all began one chilly morning in Phoenix, Arizona. Mrs. Eleanor woke up to a noise coming from the kitchen. It was early. It wasn't even fully daylight yet, but the dishes were already rattling, and the smell of freshly cooked oatmeal made her stomach rumble. She sat on the edge of the bed, put on the cotton robe that was over 15 years old, and slowly walked toward the kitchen. Her heels ached, but her heart ached more because her children had been acting strange for days. When she arrived, she stood still. What she saw crushed her soul. The table was full of food. Bagels, warm toast, bacon, scrambled eggs, fresh cheese, and coffee. Mark, the eldest, was already eating in a hurry. Diane was talking on her cell phone with someone. And Kevin, the youngest, was reviewing some papers, but no one looked up at her. "You didn't make any for me?" Eleanor asked in a quiet voice, not wanting to bother them. Diane clicked her tongue and answered without looking at her. "Well, we didn't know if you were going to wake up. Sometimes you get up late. And there's never enough," Kevin added without lifting his head. Eleanor swallowed hard. She took a step toward the refrigerator to make herself something, even just 1 egg. But when she grabbed the handle, something stopped her. A metallic click, a cold resistance. It was a padlock. They had put a padlock on the fridge. In her house. In her kitchen. On her refrigerator. "What is this?" she said in a low, almost trembling voice. Mark let out a sigh of annoyance. "It's for precaution. Mom, you forget to close things properly. We've had a few things spoil because of you, and also because we can't afford all the extra expense," Diane added. "Mrs." Eleanor didn't answer. She lowered her gaze. She pressed her lips together, and with tears in her eyes, she went straight to the pantry. She only found a piece of old bread roll, hard as a rock, and half a packet of instant coffee. She sat in the rocking chair on the back porch, and while chewing that bread as if it were cardboard, she thought, "When did my children stop loving me?" What she didn't know was that that day was going to change everything. Because hidden in that house, among old documents and buried memories, there was something that her late husband George had left in writing. A paper that would reveal the truth and destroy everything her children were secretly planning. Now, allow me a moment before continuing. If this story is already touching your heart, we ask you a very special favor. This channel has a goal: to reach 150,000 subscribers before the year ends. And to achieve it, we need a lot of your help. Subscribe to the channel, hit the notification bell, and like this video. We will be very grateful to you. And tell me in the comments what country and city are you listening to us from. Now, let's get back to Mrs. Eleanor, because that same morning, while they were humiliating her, she was going to begin remembering things she had been trying to forget for years. Just as she got up from the rocking chair on the porch, Mrs. Eleanor heard the front door open abruptly. She didn't need to turn around to know it was Mark. He always arrived the same way, as if the world owed him something, as if every step he took were a constant demand. Out here again. Mom, he snapped with that tone that wasn't a yell, but hurt more than a yell. Eleanor didn't answer. She turned slowly, her gaze caressing the small, dry garden that George had tended with such care in other times. Now it was just dust and neglect. It's cold out here. Mum. Go inside, Mark ordered, closing the door behind him. They went into the kitchen. Mark put a folder on the table, adjusted his reading glasses, and took out some papers. What's that? Eleanor asked, noticing the seal of a real estate agency. Nothing that concerns you, he replied without looking at her. It's work stuff. She wanted to believe him. She wanted to think that she still had some place in her children's lives. But something in her chest told her he was lying. She had known him since he was a baby. She knew when Mark was hiding something, and he was doing it now. Is it about the house? She asked carefully, as if testing the water. What? No. No. Don't start. Mom. I already told you not to worry about those things. I just asked. Well, don't ask. He cut her off sharply. Look, you've lived a long time. Mum, we are the ones who have to figure out how to move forward. The house isn't functional anymore. It's old. It's damp. What if it collapses with you inside? Then the problem is mine. Eleanor clenched her teeth. Old. Damp. Useless. As if he were talking about the house, but also about her. Your dad and I built this house, she said in a firm yet shaky voice. Every brick, every penny. You were raised here. Yeah, and we appreciate it. Okay, but the world changes. We can't live in the past. Mark picked up the papers and went straight to the back room, the one that used to be George's. He closed the door. Eleanor remained standing there, feeling a pang shoot through her stomach. She didn't know if it was hunger or fear. Minutes later, Diane entered through the back door, talking on the phone, smiling as if nothing was wrong. She was carrying shopping bags, but not for her. She didn't even say hello. Eleanor only managed to hear one sentence through the noise of the cell phone. The appraiser said we could get up to 1,300,000 if we sort out the will. Eleanor's blood ran cold. The will? Were they talking about the house? She went up the stairs slowly, as if each step led her to a more painful reality. She entered her room, closed the door, and sat on the bed. She looked toward the wall where her wedding portrait with George still hung. Both of them young, happy, full of dreams. It was then that she remembered a conversation one night years ago. George sitting on that very bed with a serious look as if he already knew what was coming. Eleanor, he had said back then, if I'm ever gone, you make sure you search thoroughly. There are things no one else should find before you. At that moment, she hadn't paid attention. She thought it was the talk of a tired man. But now those words drilled into her memory. Eleanor got up, opened the drawer where she kept George's clothes, and began sifting through old shirts, folded receipts, and broken diaries. Nothing. Everything smelled of dust and the past. She knelt beside the dresser. That antique piece of pine furniture that George had bought in a flea market in Brooklyn. She ran her fingers over it. touching the back, the sides. Something was wrong. There was a gap she hadn't felt before. A separation between the wood. A false space. She tapped it with her knuckles. It sounded hollow, but she couldn't figure out how to open it. Just then, she heard Diane's voice from downstairs. "Mum, Mark says you're going to have to sign some papers tomorrow. Don't pretend you're asleep." Eleanor stayed still in front of the dresser, her hands on the wood, her heart beating so loud it seemed to break the silence of the room. And then, for the first time, she didn't feel fear. She felt rage, a silent, warm rage that reminded her who she was and everything she had suppressed for years. And while her daughter's voice called her from the kitchen, Eleanor closed her eyes, took a deep breath, and made a decision. Mrs. Eleanor walked down the stairs, her gaze still fixed on her own hands. She had been locked in her room for over half an hour, touching that piece of furniture, as if she could open it with the power of memory. She didn't say anything. She made no noise. She just walked down with that silent gait people have when they feel something slipping through their fingers, but they don't know what it is yet. When she reached the kitchen, she found Diane taking some containers out of the fridge. She didn't even look at her. "It's your turn to sweep the patio today." "Right?" she asked, as if they were roommates, not mother and daughter. Eleanor nodded. It wasn't the first time they had spoken to her that way. But something inside her was beginning to make noise. A new noise, as if there was no room for more resignation inside. Diane placed a plate of cold rice and half a bruised banana on the table. "Here. If you don't like it. There's old bread in the pantry. But don't you go making demands. Okay?" Eleanor didn't say anything. She walked slowly to the table, sat down, and began to eat in silence. The rice tasted like nothing. The banana had black spots. She chewed slowly as if she were afraid that plate would be the last one of the day. While she was eating, she heard the front door open. It was Martha. "Excuse me," she said from the entrance. "I have some leftover oatmeal cookies. Is Mrs. Eleanor here?" Diane came out of the kitchen. "She's eating. But don't worry. You don't need to bring her things. We're taking care of her." Martha smiled without showing her teeth. But her eyes didn't smile with her. "I'm just stopping by to say hello. If you'll permit me." She entered without waiting for an answer and peered into the kitchen. Seeing Eleanor eating that sad plate, she felt a lump in her throat. "How are you?" "Dear, I brought you some cookies. They're not the fancy kind, but they're good." Eleanor looked up and for the first time in days smiled for real. She motioned for her to come closer. Martha sat down next to her. "I only have a little coffee left," Eleanor said. "But it's enough for both of us." "Sharing one is plenty," Martha replied. As they shared the coffee, Diane slipped into her room, leaving the door ajar. From there, Eleanor heard her talking on the phone. Her tone was soft, but the words were like piercing needles. "Yes, the appraiser already came. He says if we remodel the bathroom and paint the facade, the house could easily go up. My mum doesn't have an opinion. She's old. She'll sign whatever we tell her to. She doesn't notice anything. Martha looked at her. Eleanor looked at her, too. They didn't say a single word. But in that exchange of glances, there was an entire conversation. Martha finished her coffee and before leaving squeezed her arm tightly. "Stop by my place later. I want to show you something. It's important." Eleanor nodded. Then she collected this plate, washed it patiently, wiped the table, and went out to the patio to sweep. Out there, while shaking the dry dirt between the dead flower pots, Eleanor thought about the phone call, about the furniture, about George's sentence that had been echoing in her mind for days. There are things no one else should find before you. But what things? Suddenly, she heard Kevin's voice from the entrance. "Mom, Diane says to collect your clothes from the clothesline. Some visitors are coming tomorrow." "Who's coming?" "A guy. He says he's going to check a few things out." "Nothing serious." Kevin disappeared without waiting for an answer. Eleanor dropped the broom. Her throat went dry. She looked back toward the kitchen where the padlock was still firm on the refrigerator like a visible scar. She went up to George's room again, touched the furniture, checked one more time. And this time she noticed a slight scratch on the wood, as if someone else had already tried to open it before. Someone who wasn't her. The scratch on the wood wasn't old. Mrs. Eleanor knew it when she touched it, when she traced it with the tip of her finger. It was a new mark, slight, but not accidental. And in that house, coincidences no longer existed. Someone had tried to open the back of the dresser, but hadn't succeeded. And that someone wasn't her. She kept silent. She sighed it long, deep, and let the air cleanse some of the rage growing inside her. Then she slowly went down the stairs and walked straight to the house next door. Martha was waiting for her with a cup of hot spiced cider and 2 pieces of sweet cornbread. "I saw you from my window. You had that look on your face like something is eating you up inside," the neighbor said bluntly. What happened now? Eleanor sat down. She didn't answer immediately. She took the bread carefully, took a sip of the tea, and then with her gaze lost on the plastic tablecloth with faded flowers, she said, "Diane is hiding something. I know it. And Mark is too. There's something strange about all this. Yesterday, I overheard them talking to an appraiser about the house. They say they're going to sell it. That I just have to sign and that's it. As if I were an old piece of furniture. But George, he told me he had hidden something. Something I should find." Martha lowered her voice. She leaned in a little. "Did you know that many years ago George came to see me one afternoon? He was serious. Strange. He told me he was afraid of what his children might do to you. That he didn't trust Mark." Eleanor looked up, surprised. "You never told me that." "Why?" "He gave me an envelope. He told me not to open it, to keep it, and only to hand it over if you ever asked me for it, or if something very serious happened." Eleanor was speechless. Her heart was pounding, but she didn't say anything else. That conversation was enough to confirm what she suspected. George had anticipated something, and that something was beginning to happen. They spent the afternoon talking like 2 women sharing the same wound, the same disillusionment, that of having given everything and receiving abandonment. It was almost night when Eleanor returned home. Diane was waiting for her in the living room, sitting as if she had been counting the seconds. "Where were you?" she asked, arms crossed. "With Martha. With that woman again. You should stop telling her your business. She's not your family." Eleanor stared at her. "For the first time in a long time, my family no longer recognizes me." Diane scoffed and went toward the patio, leaving a thick silence behind her. Eleanor went up to her room. She sat on the bed and opened an old wooden box she had kept for years. Inside were her notebooks from when she and George were starting out together, their wedding day photos, and a couple of old receipts, including the one for the first payment on the lot. She remembered that day as if it were yesterday. It was the year 1972. George was barely 27 years old. She was 24. The lot was in a vacant dirt field with no electricity, no paved street. Nobody wanted to live there, but they saw it with different eyes. "We're going to build our house here," George said, planting his feet firmly in the dust. "And where are we going to get the money?" she asked, laughing. "I've already saved it. I worked double shifts for months. And Mr. Johnson, the welder, loaned me the rest." "What if we can't do it?" she insisted. "We will, because we are doing this for them," he said, stroking her belly. "For our children, but most of all for you." Eleanor returned to the present with her eyes full of tears. She clenched the receipt between her fingers as if it were a shield. A proof. A warning. Suddenly, she heard a noise in the hallway. It was Kevin. "Mum," he said in a low voice. "Mark is coming tomorrow with a notary. They're going to need you to sign some papers. They didn't tell me exactly what they are, but you know how he gets if someone refuses." Eleanor looked at him from the doorway. "And what do you think?" "Kevin?" He lowered his head. I don't want any trouble." And he left. She closed the door slowly. She sat on the bed again. There was no more room for doubt. Something big was being cooked up behind her back. She didn't sleep that night. She just waited for dawn. Because on the other side of the wall, Martha had been holding a sealed envelope for decades. And Mrs. Eleanor was ready to ask for it. Since before noon, Diane was bustling around the house like a busy bee. She moved from one side of the house to the other, moving furniture, mopping harder than necessary, and putting dishes in the oven without asking for help. Mrs. Eleanor, sitting in the rocking chair on the patio, watched everything with a silence that was becoming heavier and heavier. Something was cooking, and it wasn't just food. "I have company tonight," Diane said, wiping a crystal glass. "So, please stay in your room. I don't want any scenes or questions." "Yes." Eleanor looked at her without moving. "Company from who?" "Friends from work. But also an important man is coming who is helping us with a matter. You don't need to know more." "And why do I have to hide?" "You're not hiding," Diane replied impatiently. "It's so you'll be more comfortable. You tend to say inappropriate things, and I don't want people to think we live poorly here. Do you understand me?" Eleanor lowered her gaze. She nodded with a barely visible movement. She didn't have the strength to argue. Not yet. The afternoon passed with dishes, fake laughter, background music, and the aroma of roasted meat. Eleanor from her room could hear everything. Diane's exaggerated laughter, the forced conversations, and a male voice she didn't recognize, but who spoke freely, as if the house were his own. "And is this property free of legal issues?" the man asked between bites. "Completely," Diane said. "The house is in my mother's name, but she already gave us authorization for everything. The notary is coming tomorrow to review papers and sign. Everything is calm." "Mrs." Eleanor clenched her fist. Her heart was pounding against her chest. "Authorization. Everything is calm." She had given permission. She didn't even know exactly what they were talking about. But whatever it was, they were doing it without her. And the worst part, they were using her as a decorative figure, as an obstacle to be moved. If this story is touching your heart, please consider subscribing and sharing this video. It helps us grow and bring more true stories like this to light. Shortly after, someone knocked on her door. It was Kevin. With a tray in his hands, he brought her a cold dinner: unsalted rice, reheated beans, and a stiff tortilla. "Sorry, Mom," he said in a low voice. But there wasn't much left over. Eleanor looked at him for a long time. She didn't say anything. She just took the plate and closed the door gently. She ate in silence. With every spoonful, she thought of George's eyes, the promise he had made her, the document that Martha was still keeping, and how for the first time she didn't feel entirely alone. Around 9 that night, when the house had returned to silence and the guests had left, Eleanor went out to the patio with a blanket over her shoulder. She sat in her usual chair, looking up at the stars, letting the cool air dry the tears she could no longer hold back. It was then that she heard footsteps on the gravel. Martha was crossing the side path that connected the two houses. "I heard they locked you up today," she said, sitting down next to her. "They hid me," Eleanor corrected. "We're not going to let that happen anymore." They both remained silent for a moment. Then Martha took something out of her shawl, an old yellowish envelope with George's handwriting on the front. "Here is what your husband gave me. He told me that if things ever got ugly, you would know when to open it. And I think that day has come." Eleanor took it with both hands, looked at it as if it had fire inside, and without hesitating tucked it under her blouse against her chest. "Thank you. Dear friend. Tomorrow, when they come with their notaries and their lies, you won't be alone anymore. Mrs." Eleanor didn't answer. She just nodded, looking up at the sky. But inside, something had already awakened, because her freedom could be written on that envelope. And deep down, someone in that house already suspected it. Mrs. Eleanor woke up before the sun. She didn't close her eyes all night. The envelope that Martha had given her was now sleeping inside her bra next to her chest, as if it were a secret too alive to leave alone. She had thought of opening it right there in the early morning under the yellow light of her lamp. But something in her heart told her to wait, not out of fear, but out of respect. Because George wasn't just any man, and that envelope wasn't just any envelope either. She fixed her hair in front of the mirror, smoothing the grey strands with her own hands. She put on the navy blue dress, the one she had worn to the last mass she went to with George. She put on a little of the perfume that was left in the bottle she had kept for years and walked down the stairs with dignity, as if descending to the altar. The house was silent. Diane and Kevin were still asleep. Mark hadn't arrived. She walked to the kitchen, took old coffee from the pantry, and put it on the gas stove to boil. She poured only 1 cup. She sat at the usual table in front of the window and finally took out the envelope. She looked at it for a long time. George's handwriting was clear, firm, almost solemn. For Eleanor, only you. She carefully slid her fingers along the edge. She opened it. There was a folded time-yellowed sheet of paper with the letterhead of a law office in downtown Chicago and the signature of attorney David Young. At first, the words didn't make sense to her. But as she read, her breathing slowed. Her stomach tightened, and her throat closed up. George had left a will, and not just any will. In that document, dated just a few months before his death, he declared that the entire house, the land, the assets, the improvements, everything built from 1972 to the present was to remain exclusively and totally in the name of his wife, Eleanor Baker, as long as she lived. And the most shocking part was at the end. And upon my wife's passing, this estate will be irrevocably transferred to the person she designates as the beneficiary, provided that person has demonstrated true dignity, respect, and care during the last years of her life. If none of our children meets that condition, it will be transferred to whomever has, even if they are not related by blood. Eleanor felt her heart jump into her throat. That last sentence was not there by chance. George had written that, with knowledge, he already knew. Maybe he knew before she did. She folded the paper again, put it back in her bra, got up from the table, and went straight to Martha's house. She knocked 3 times. Martha was already awake. "Did you open it?" she asked. Knowing the answer, without Eleanor saying anything. "Yes," she answered. "And now I understand a lot of things." They both sat in the living room, the one that always smelled of rosemary and freshly baked bread. Eleanor told her everything calmly, without emitting a single word. When she finished, Martha stared at her as if seeing her for the first time. "So, are you going to tell them?" "Not yet." "And what are you going to do? Wait for them to take the next step?" "And when they do, that's when I'll drop the truth on them." Just then, Martha's phone rang. It was an unknown number. Martha answered cautiously. "Hello." A serious male voice spoke from the other end. "Is this Mrs. Eleanor Baker? I'm Attorney Miller. Your children called me to review some deeds. We're coming over this afternoon. They told me you will sign without a problem. I just want to confirm you'll be available." Martha looked up and stared at Eleanor, who understood immediately. "Yes," Martha replied, lowering her voice. "She will be here. We'll be expecting you." She hung up. "They're coming today," she said. "Not tomorrow. Today." "Perfect," Eleanor replied. "Then this afternoon, they're going to find out who I am and who their father was." She got up. She walked back to her house with her head held high. And for the first time in a long time, she didn't feel invisible, because that document wasn't just a piece of paper. It was proof that there was still justice in a world that was crashing down on her. And what Mrs. Eleanor didn't know was that someone had already smelled the fear, because that same morning, Diane would enter her room without warning and find the drawer empty. It was 8:00 the morning when Diane shoved open Mrs. Eleanor's bedroom door with her shoulder. She didn't knock. She didn't announce herself. She entered with that sense of ownership that had been forming in her since she moved back into that house, as if being born there entitled her to everything, even her mother's privacy. "Mom, are you awake?" she asked in a false tone, as if speaking to a silly child. Mrs. Eleanor was not there. The bed was made. The room in order. Not a trace of her. Diane frowned. She walked to the dresser. Opened drawers. She searched in a hurry. The back drawer, the one where she had once found some old notebooks, was now empty. She looked under the bed. Nothing. She stormed downstairs in a fury. "Kevin. Have you seen Mom?" she yelled from the kitchen. "No." "Why? She's not here. And she didn't leave a note or anything. And what are you worried about? She probably went to Martha's. She's always glued to that old woman." Diane didn't answer. She rested her hands on the kitchen counter. She closed her eyes for a second. She was agitated, even though she didn't want to admit it. She bit her thumbnail while her mind went back to a scene from more than 15 years ago. She had recently separated from her children's father. She had returned home with her 2 small children with no money, no job, and her pride shattered. George was still alive and accepted her without conditions. But one afternoon, while sweeping the back room, she saw her father sealing an envelope with a serious look. He put it in a box and hid it behind the dresser. Diane didn't ask, but she didn't forget. Years later, after George had died, she tried to move that furniture, looking for valuable papers. She found the box empty. Now that emptiness weighed on her like a stone in her stomach. At Martha's house, the atmosphere was different. Mrs. Eleanor was sitting at the table with a cup of chamomile tea in her hands. In front of her, an open Bible. Inside, a folded photograph which she herself had saved years ago. On the back, written in George's shaky but firm handwriting, it said, "When you read this, remember what I hid for you. The correct name is there. Don't trust anyone who hasn't taken care of you." Eleanor had already read it 3 times. She still didn't fully understand what he was referring to. The correct name of what? Of whom? Are you sure you don't want to read the document again? Martha asked from the stove. I already read it. Dear friend, I know what it says, but there's something else. He left something between the lines. He didn't just leave me the house. He left me a decision. Which one? The document says that when I die, the property passes to the person I designate, provided they have demonstrated dignity and respect. Martha looked at her bewildered. So George knew his children would fail. He wrote it with full intention. But he also knew that someone would take care of me. Someone who is not blood, but his family and my life. Martha didn't know what to say. She lowered her gaze. Something moved forcefully in her chest. She didn't say a word, but there were contained tears in her eyes. Hours later, the doorbell rang. That must be them, Martha said. Looking out the window, They arrived. Mrs. Eleanor slowly stood up. She walked to the door calmly but firmly. She opened it. There were Mark, Diane, and a suited man with a clipboard in his hand. Attorney Miller. Mrs. Eleanor. It's a pleasure. I'm the notary your daughter hired to formalize some procedures. May we come in? No, she replied without hesitation. We're not signing anything here today. If you want to talk about papers, it will be somewhere else and with a different lawyer. Diane approached, clenching her teeth. Mum, what are you saying? Are you okay? Better than ever. Eleanor took the original document that George had drafted out of her purse. She held it with both hands like someone raising a banner. Here is the only paper that matters. Mark tried to snatch it away. Eleanor pulled it back immediately. Don't you dare, she yelled. This house is not in your name. Not yours. Diane. Not Kevin's. It's in my name. And after me. It will belong to the person who has been by my side. Not the one who locks me up, insults me, or feeds me scraps. Silence fell like a stone. The uncomfortable notary adjusted his glasses. With all due respect, if there is a previous document, this changes everything. That's right, Eleanor said. And it doesn't just change everything. This is just beginning. Mark clenched his fists. Diane turned pale. Kevin, on the other hand, he didn't say anything. He just lowered his gaze. And there in that hallway, Mrs. Eleanor knew that her fight was no longer a secret. It was open. It was real. And the house wasn't the only thing she was going to defend. The slamming of the door echoed throughout the house. Mark left in a fury and crossed the yard without looking at anyone. Diane went after him, upset, but more worried than angry. The uncomfortable notary said goodbye with a half-hearted handshake and drove away without looking back. Mrs. Eleanor remained standing there in the entrance, firm. The document was still in her hand, folded, but intact. Her fingers were trembling, but not from fear, but from strength. The same strength that hadn't emerged in years. The one that had been buried since George died. Martha, who had witnessed everything from the porch, offered her arm. Eleanor gently refused it. I don't need to be held up today. Dear friend, I can stand on my own today. They both smiled. The kind of smile that is born when the soul finally breathes. But the calm didn't last long. Kevin entered after the others, walking slowly. He didn't say anything. He just walked past Eleanor with his head down, as if he didn't know whether he should feel ashamed or relieved. And that doubt was harder than any word. The house fell into a strange silence. The children didn't say a word all afternoon. Not a direct complaint, nor a shout. But the atmosphere became thick. Every step Eleanor took down the hallway was observed by eyes that no longer disguised their discomfort. That night, no one offered her dinner. No one asked her if she was hungry. Without asking for anything, she ate what was left of the rice that Martha had sent her days before, heating it patiently in an old pot, sitting alone in the kitchen, and chewing in silence. There was no bitterness in her expression, only a bitter peace. That of someone who no longer expects anything from anyone. The next day, Mark didn't sleep at home. Diane didn't show up either. But Kevin did, and it was he who broke the ice. "Are you really going to leave this house like this?" he asked while drinking water from the dispenser. "Without sharing anything?" Eleanor looked up from the patio where she was watering the plants. "Like what?" "Well, just for you. You don't even need that much anymore. We have prolonged cohabitation with hostile people. You want surveillance? Any method that documents their behavior legally. Cameras in the common areas of your own home. Legal. Living room. Kitchen. Hallways. Audio and video. Cloud backup. Access from your phone." She gave me a quote. $5,000 upfront retainer, plus hourly fees. I signed the contract without hesitation. The money was worthless compared to the truth. "I'll need access on Tuesday," she said. "Could you get them out for a couple of hours?" "I'll arrange it." On Tuesday morning, during breakfast, I casually mentioned, "I need some things from that specialty market in Coral Gables. Would you mind picking them up? Maybe we can grab lunch together." I gave them a detailed list. Things from a store 30 minutes away. They left at 10. I texted Veronica. She arrived 15 minutes later with equipment cases. Cameras were placed on a living room bookshelf, in a kitchen clock above the table, and in a hallway smoke detector. Small, invisible, recording everything. 90 minutes later, installation complete. "Everything completely normal," she stated. "Don't let them know you're watching. The best evidence comes when they feel safe." That night, I sat in my study with headphones on, watching the day's recordings. Their return from the errand. The conversation in the kitchen as they unpacked groceries. "He's too quiet," Elena said, her voice tight with worry. "It's suspicious. We need another approach." Julian leaned against the counter, arms crossed. The direct hit didn't work. Time for the indirect hit. I saved the file, dated it, and labeled it Evidence Log Entry 1. The following days allowed me to build my case. February 28th. Julian discussed contingency plans. March 1st. Elena worried that I was acting strangely. March 2nd. They looked up lawyers to challenge my mental competency. March 3rd. Julian's search history showed declarations of parental incapacity. Every conversation was documented, saved, and organized into folders by topic. I watched them conspire against me with the methodical patience of someone building a legal case brick by brick. Veronica sent weekly reports, their social media activity, online purchases, public record searches, the digital trail of people preparing for war. On March 4th, I decided to give them exactly what they wanted. At breakfast, I rubbed my temples. I've been feeling so tired lately. Their heads snapped up like bloodhounds on a scent. That night at dinner, I feigned forgetting where I had left my reading glasses. I've been very forgetful. Elena leaned forward, feigning concern. "Maybe you should see a doctor." "Dad, It's normal at your age, Julian added casually, but it's definitely worth checking out. I nodded, playing the confused old man. Later, reviewing the recording, I saw them celebrate my confession as if it were a gift. On the night of March 18th, after 3 weeks of evidence, dozens of conversations, and hundreds of hours of recording, I opened my phone and found Harrison Cole's number. Tomorrow, we would build a strategy. It was time to move from documentation to action. The articles appeared on March 5th. I found them scattered on the kitchen counter that morning. Printed pages about cognitive decline, the early symptoms of dementia, and the importance of medical evaluation for seniors. Elena was by the coffee maker watching my reaction. I found this online. I thought it might be helpful to understand what's been happening with you. I picked up the first article and skimmed it with appropriate confusion. I suppose reading wouldn't hurt. Knowledge is power, Julian added from the doorway. His smile didn't reach his eyes. I took the articles to my study, photographed each page, and filed them as evidence. Psychological manipulation documented. They were constructing a narrative. The confused old man who needed intervention, who couldn't be trusted to handle his own affairs. Over the next 3 days, more articles appeared. Residences for people with dementia. The importance of power of attorney. Financial management for those experiencing cognitive difficulties. Each one was carefully placed where I would find it. Each one was photographed and filed. On March 8th, the surveillance cameras caught them in the living room, believing they were alone. "We need an expert opinion," Julian said. "Someone who can evaluate him professionally." "A psychologist?" Elena's voice held equal parts hope and guilt. "I know someone. Dr. Elias Thorne, a clinical psychologist specializing in elderly cognition. We set up a casual lunch. I introduce them. Elias makes observations. Will he do it ethically? Will he be objective? If your father shows symptoms, Elias documents them. If not, Julian shrugged, then we'll know for sure. I watched this conversation 3 times, taking notes. The tension was escalating. They were seeking external validation for their version of events. On March 10th, I met Julian for lunch at a cafe in Coconut Grove. He had suggested it that morning so we can get to know each other better without the stress of work. And I accepted with appropriate gratitude. Dr. Elias Thorne joined us 15 minutes in. "Hey, this is my friend Elias." I mentioned him, the psychologist. We shook hands. Elias, about 40-something. Professional demeanor, cautious eyes. "Julian told me about you. Successful sale. Congratulations." We talked for an hour. My performance was impeccable. I occasionally searched for words, asked Elias to repeat questions, and commented on my forgetfulness. I didn't exaggerate, just a hint of confusion. Elias maintained professional distance, but I caught him watching me, evaluating, cataloguing. "It was a pleasure meeting you," Elias said as lunch ended, handing me his card. "If you ever want to discuss professional topics, I'm available." I put the card in my pocket. Evidence. not service. That night, the surveillance cameras recorded Julian calling Elias from the living room. The speakerphone on. "What did you think?" Julian asked impatiently. He's 63. Some age-appropriate variation in memory isn't unusual. Elias's voice was carefully neutral. "I can't make clinical assessments based on an informal lunch conversation. But if there were genuine concerns, I could evaluate him formally. With his consent. Yes. But Julian, I'm not comfortable being part of this. If you have legitimate concerns about his well-being, there are proper channels." "Sure. I'm just exploring options." After hanging up, Julian's face darkened. "We'll find someone else." I saved that recording with particular satisfaction. Even when they tried to corrupt professionals, ethics intervened. From March 12th to 17th, I continued my performance. Small errors, confusion, repeated questions. On the 15th, at breakfast, I asked Eleanor about the plans we had discussed the night before, feigning forgetfulness. Her eyes lit up with excitement, barely concealed. The surveillance cameras recorded everything. Their conversations about my decline, Julian researching commitment procedures, Eleanor worrying that things were moving too slowly. On March 18th, I adjusted my strategy. At dinner, I casually commented that I had been thinking about updating my will. Julian suggested it given the business sale. I want to make sure everything is in order. A dead silence fell. Then Eleanor, trying to sound nonchalant. "That's responsible. Dad, when are you meeting with him? He'll be preparing the documents soon. Making sure you're well taken care of." I left the words hanging in the air. Bait in a trap. After dinner, I retreated to my study. The surveillance cameras recorded them in the kitchen. They spoke in low voices, but the microphone caught everything. "He mentioned the will," Eleanor said, barely containing her hope. "That doesn't mean he's changing it in our favor." Julian's voice held a warning. "It could be the opposite. But if he really is confused, if we document that he's not competent when making changes, then we challenge them later. Either way, we need more evidence of his decline. Real evidence, not just observations." They talked for 40 minutes, planning how to document my supposed incompetence. Video, everything. Record strange behavior. Build a case for incapacity that would invalidate any legal change against their interests. I watched them celebrate their cleverness, pouring wine and toasting to progress. They thought they were winning. I closed the laptop, opened my phone, and searched for Harrison Cole's number. 3 weeks of recordings, conversations, plans, attempts at manipulation, psychological warfare, all captured with perfect digital clarity. Tomorrow, we would discuss how weeks of evidence could be turned into a legal strategy, how surveillance could be a tool for pressure, how their own words could destroy them. I had documented their plan with the same methodical patience they had used on mine. Only I had done it better. With more detail. With more strategy. It was time to move to the next phase. It was time to show them what happened when they underestimated a man who built an empire from scratch, who understood that true power lay in preparation, documentation, and knowing exactly when to strike. I texted Harrison. I have new compelling evidence. Need an urgent meeting. He responded in minutes. Friday at 10, 0 inches the morning. Bring everything. I hung up the phone. Through the study window, the moonlight painted the lawn silver. In the house around me, they slept soundly, believing they were the architects of my ruin. They had no idea they were building their own. The morning light streamed through the study windows. March 19th at 8, I picked up the phone and dialed Harrison Cole's direct number. He answered on the second ring. Mr. Sterling, your message said you had evidence. Weeks of it. Surveillance recordings. Conversations. Attempts at manipulation. All documented. I need to meet today. This afternoon at 2, bring everything. I spent the morning organizing it. I created a folder on my laptop called Legal Evidence Package. Surveillance files copied, organized by date and severity. Printed transcripts of their most damning conversations. Julian talking about competency challenges. Elena worried about my suspicious silence. Both celebrating their supposed progress toward controlling my assets. Veronica's weekly reports went into a manila envelope, underlined and tabbed. I loaded everything onto 2 USB drives, one for Harrison and one backup. At 2, I sat across from Harrison in his conference room. The USB drive and documents between us, like exhibits in a trial. He watched 3 hours of recording, read all the transcripts, and studied Veronica's behavioral analysis. Finally, he leaned back, fingers interlaced. This is extensive. Multiple legal options, restraining orders, civil lawsuit, criminal charges for attempted poisoning. He tapped the trust document I had mentioned. But first, we protect your assets. Irrevocable living trust. How does that work? Assets are transferred to the trust. It becomes an independent legal entity. An independent trustee administers it. You set the conditions for beneficiary access. Once signed, they are untouchable. Not even you can modify them. He pulled out a notepad and began sketching the structure. We'll make it bulletproof. They won't be able to access it through lawsuits, manipulate the administrators, or effectively challenge it. How long would it take? A week. If we act now, you'll transfer the majority of your assets. Keep enough liquidity for personal use. We'll establish strict conditions for Elena's eventual access. What conditions? Harrison smiled. A sharp professional grin. Whatever you want. Age requirements. Financial independence. Absence of pending lawsuits. In short, any measure that ensures she cannot access the money through coercion or fraud. Over the next 5 days, we built an impenetrable fortress around my wealth. March 20th. Trust structure designed. $25 million transferred to the trust. $5 million kept liquid for my use. Elena could access it at age 45, 9 years from now, if she demonstrated 5 years of financial independence and had no civil or criminal cases against her for financial reasons. On March 23rd, a meeting with Florida Fiduciary Services. 2 fiduciary officers, professional and impartial, explained their role. They would follow this document to the letter. No family pressure. No manipulation. No exceptions. March 24th. Final signing. Harrison's conference room again. But this time with a notary and fiduciary officers present. The documents lay across the table like a treaty ending a war. I signed each page, initialed and dated. The notary officially sealed each signature. Your assets are protected, Harrison said as I put the copies in a leather folder. She cannot manipulate, coerce, or sue you for them. The trust is irrevocable. Case closed. I drove home with a feeling I hadn't felt since February. Power, control, security. At home, life continued its strange theatre. They still knew nothing of the trust. The surveillance cameras recorded their casual conversations about the inheritance, their certainty that eventually my money would be theirs. March 28th. Breakfast. Buttered toast. Elena mentioned when we inherit, as if it were inevitable. That night, Julian's laptop search history, how to challenge a will in Florida. I decided to tell them on April 1st, an auspicious date for plans to unravel. On March 31st, I texted both of them. Family meeting tomorrow. 10:00 the morning. In the living room. Important. Harrison had advised doing it in public or with witnesses. They could become aggressive. My house, I replied. My rules. The cameras would record everything. April 1st arrived. A clear, bright day. I set up my laptop connected to the television with the surveillance footage ready. At 10, they entered the living room. A palpable, nervous energy in the air. I stood. They sat. The sofa was lower than I was, establishing a hierarchy. I have made decisions about my estate. I filed the trust document. I have created an irrevocable living trust. Their attention sharpened. I explained systematically. $25 million transferred. Independent trustee. Conditions of access. Minimum age 45. Financial independence. No pending lawsuits. I watched their faces register comprehension. What? Elena's voice cracked. Are you cutting me out? I am protecting my assets from manipulation. Julian leaped up from the sofa. All this over the restaurant. A mistake. And you? A mistake. I picked up the remote and hit play. Their voices filled the room. Surveillance footage. Them talking about my competency issues. Planning to document my decline. Celebrating their progress toward the inheritance. You spied on us, Elena cried now. Your own daughter. I protected myself from those who tried to drug me into signing legal documents. We're going to sue. Julian stepped forward, poorly disguising his aggression. We're going to challenge this. You can't. It's irrevocable. It's done. Legally bulletproof. I looked him in the eyes without blinking. Try to challenge it. Don't waste your money on lawyers. We've lived here for 5 years. We have rights. You have no rights to my money. You never did. Julian stormed out. Elena followed, sobbing. I went back to my study, reviewed the camera recording of the confrontation I had just captured. saved it with the date and time, and a label, evidence of reaction. The rage confirmed their guilt. The following week, the house became a battlefield. Doors slamming, hostile silence. Calls to lawyers were overheard, all saying the same thing. The trust was solid, unshakable. On April 7th, Elena attempted reconciliation. She knocked on my study door, tears welling up. "Dad, we can fix this. I'm your daughter." My daughter would never have tried to poison me. It was a mistake. "Please leave my study." She left. I sat alone, staring at the wall, knowing what came next. The trust protected my money. Now, I needed to reclaim my house. I opened my notebook and wrote 4 words: "Get them out of the house." That same night, I called a real estate agent, Linda Moretti, recommended by my banker for her discretion and speed. "I want to sell my house. When can we list it?" "I can see it tomorrow morning. If it's as you describe, we could list it this weekend." April 8th. She arrived with a tape measure and a professional appraisal. I walked through the rooms where my daughter and son-in-law still lived, evaluating the market value of the house they were borrowing. A lovely property. I can list it for $7 million. This market moves fast, but the property must be vacant for showings. It will be. The listing went live on April 10th. First showings scheduled for April 12th. I notified Elena and Julian via text message. Showings Friday. "You'll need to be out for 3 hours." "You're selling the house?" Julian replied by text. "Yes." There was no response. They left on Friday morning, and when they returned, they found business cards from potential buyers on the kitchen counter. Their faces registered the comprehension that I was completely dismantling their life. On April 15th, I asked Harrison to draft the eviction notice formal, legal, final, giving them 60 days to vacate. I handed it to them that night as they sat in the living room, their borrowed living room. Julian read it, his face darkening. He tore it in half. "You can't evict us. This is our home." Read the notice. "Challenge it all you want. No lease. No rent. No tenant rights. 60 days. June 15th. We'll fight this. Try it." They hired a lawyer on April 16th. I listened to their consultation call via surveillance cameras. The lawyer's assessment matched Harrison's. If there's no lease, he has grounds. You live there by permission, which he is now revoking. Harrison filed the eviction lawsuit on April 20th. The court date was set for May 3rd, 3 weeks away. Meanwhile, I rented an apartment downtown, month-to-month lease. Oceanfront. Quiet. A clean place. No grudges. I moved out on April 28th. The house became hostile territory. I stayed mostly at the apartment, returning only for necessities. On each visit, the surveillance cameras captured their desperation. Elena crying, Julian raging, both calling lawyers who had no solutions. May 10th arrived. Miami-Dade Courthouse. 3rd floor. Eviction trial. Harrison and I sat at the plaintiff's table. Across the aisle, Elena, Julian, and their lawyer, young and overmatched, aware he had no case. Judge Vance took the bench. A man in his 52nds, serious-looking, experienced in seeing people try to evade consequences. Their lawyer stood. "Your Honor, my clients have lived in this property for 5 years." "Under what agreement?" Judge Vance interrupted. "His family. The plaintiff is Ms. Sterling Fox's father." "That is not a lease agreement." "Do they pay rent?" "No." "Do they have a written lease?" "No, Your Honor." "Then they are guests without a contract." "Mr. Sterling has given appropriate 60-day notice." He looked at Harrison. "Yes." "Your Honor, served on April 15th. They have until June 15th to vacate." Judge Vance reviewed the documents. "I see no legal impediment to this eviction. The plaintiff is the owner of the property. The defendants have no lease or rental agreement. Notice was proper." He looked at Elena and Julian. "You have until June 15th. After that date, law enforcement can intervene." Motion granted. The gavel cracked. Final decision. In the hallway, Julian confronted me, his voice low and menacing. "You'll regret this. You're destroying your own family. I am removing those who poisoned me. We'll make you pay." "With what money?" I walked away, leaving him sputtering in the hallway. The next 5 weeks were a tense standoff. I stayed at the apartment. They remained in the house, packing slowly, desperately searching for rental properties they couldn't afford without my help. The surveillance cameras recorded endless arguments. Elena breaking down, Julian's fury at their complete defeat. On June 14th, I received confirmation. The buyer of the house had completed the inspection and the sale was approved for closing in August. Pending possession handover. June 15th was moving day. I arrived at the house at noon. A large moving truck was in the driveway loading furniture. Elena, eyes red, face haggard, gave instructions to the movers. Julian loaded boxes, his jerky movements reflecting contained fury. They didn't even greet me. I stood on the lawn watching them load their possessions. Everything I had bought for them. Everything they had accumulated during 5 years of living off my generosity. The truck pulled away at 4. They drove off in Julian's car without looking back. I entered the empty house, the echo of footsteps ringing on the hardwood floor. No furniture, no trace of them. No trace of poison in the air. Room by room, I walked through the reclaimed space. Marks on the walls where pictures once hung. Indentations in the carpet where furniture had been. The house felt like an empty shell, contaminated by what had happened inside, but finally blissfully empty. My phone vibrated. Harrison. Eviction completed. Ready to talk civil lawsuit, I stood in the center of the living room. My living room. Looking around at the emptiness. Selling the house would erase their presence completely. But first, one more legal action. One final blow. I texted back. Yes. Let's schedule a meeting for Monday. It's time for this to be definitive. I wrote my reply to Harrison. Yes. Let's schedule the meeting for Monday. It was time for this to be permanently on the record. The empty living room surrounded me. No furniture. Just the hardwood floor and the echo. I sat down, my back against the wall, laptop resting on my knees, and opened the evidence folders one last time. Months of documentation, surveillance recordings ordered by date, hospital medical records, Matteo's statement, Veronica's reports, every conversation, every attempt at manipulation, every proof that what happened to me was not paranoia, but premeditated exploitation. I created a final chronological document, printed everything, and organized it into a tabbed, expanding folder. Each item told part of the story. Taken together, they were undeniable. On Monday morning, June 16th, I met Harrison in his office. He spread the evidence across the conference table as if it were an indictment. Civil lawsuit under Florida Statute 825.103, Harrison said. Taking notes. Elder exploitation. Financial manipulation. Attempted battery by drugging. Coercion. Aggravated emotional distress. Fraud. Conspiracy. Seeking $500,000 in damages plus costs. This isn't about money, I said. I know. It's about public record documenting what they did. He looked up from his notes. You want consequences? Exactly. We filed the complaint on June 17th. Elena and Julian received the court notification in their new apartment, a small two-bedroom unit in a neighborhood far removed from the luxury of Coral Gables. The process server reported they had barely unpacked. Their lawyer contacted Harrison a few days later, his voice tight on the speakerphone. My clients can't afford this. They're already ruined. They should have considered that before attempting to drug and defraud their benefactor, Harrison replied coldly. Discovery began. Harrison requested their financial records. Bank statements revealed the truth. No savings. Living paycheck to paycheck on credit cards. Drowning in debt created by their life expectations. On June 28th, the settlement offer arrived. I met Harrison in his office to review it. $50,000 payment plan. Private admission of guilt. No trial. It's reasonable, Harrison said cautiously. They clearly can't pay the full judgment, but the settlement would be confidential. No public record. I slid the papers back across his desk. No. I want this to be public. I want it on the court records forever. Trial is risky. The judge could award less compensation. I don't care about the money. I care about the record. I looked him in the eyes. They tried to destroy me. I want official record that they were wrong and I was right. Harrison nodded slowly. Then we go to trial. July became the month of preparation. Matteo confirmed he would testify. The hospital doctor provided an expert affidavit. Veronica prepared the surveillance evidence for court presentation. I gave a deposition. Hours of questions answered under oath, laying the factual foundation. July 25th. Preliminary hearing. The judge set the trial date for July 28th. That Monday morning dawned clear and hot. I dressed in my best suit and arrived early at the Miami-Dade County Courthouse. Judge Hastings presided. She was in her 52nds. Known for her impartiality and strong rulings, Harrison had recommended a bench trial instead of a jury trial. Judges understand elder law better than average citizens, he explained. Opening statements. Harrison presented the timeline and evidence summary with meticulous precision. Their lawyer, young and out of his depth, argued that a family misunderstanding had been exaggerated. Mateo testified first. He described the restaurant incident with full conviction. I saw Mrs. So. Sterling Fox pour something from a small vial into Mr. Sterling's wine glass while he was away from the table. Clear. Liquid. Deliberate action. Their lawyer attempted cross-examination. Could you have been mistaken? No. I know what I saw. I couldn't keep quiet. The hospital doctor explained the diazepam analysis results. Dosage. Dangers. Veronica presented the surveillance methodology, chain of custody, and authentication of the recordings. Day 2. July 29th. The surveillance video played on the courtroom screen. Their own voices filled the space, discussing competency issues, planning Elias's consultation, and celebrating their supposed progress toward the inheritance. Julian said, "He's 63, not lucid anymore." Elena's voice said, "We deserve this money." I watched Judge Hastings take notes, her expression serious and focused. Elena testified, crying. She admitted to the restaurant incident, but claimed she only wanted him to listen to her about important papers. Julian testified. Defensive and hostile. He blamed me for overreacting to a family conflict. Then it was my turn. The witness stand felt solemn, formal, everyone watching me. I stated my name, my age, and my relationship to the defendants. I answered Harrison's questions calmly and precisely. Restaurant surveillance, trust creation, eviction. I presented the evidence one by one. Cross-examination became aggressive. Aren't you being vengeful, Mr. Sterling? I'm seeking accountability. There's a difference. Judge Hastings asked her own question. Why pursue a civil suit after fiduciary protection and eviction? I looked straight at her. Because what they did was wrong. It needs to be on public record for my protection, as a precedent for the truth. July 30th. Closing arguments. Harrison, this is a textbook case of elder exploitation, attempted battery by drugging, financial manipulation, psychological coercion. The evidence is overwhelming. Their lawyer, family conflict and poor judgment. Yes, but not criminal exploitation. Judge Hastings closed her notebook. I will issue the ruling in writing in 2 weeks. I left the courthouse in the late afternoon heat with the satisfaction of having completed my task. I spoke the truth publicly, presented the evidence. Now justice would decide if the truth mattered. 2 weeks of waiting. 2 weeks wondering if the system would validate what I had suffered or dismiss it as family drama. I returned to my temporary apartment, watched the sunset over Biscayne Bay, and waited for the world to confirm what I already knew, that I had been right to protect myself, to defend myself, to demand justice. August 15th. The dawn light filtered over the ocean outside my balcony. Coffee steamed in my hand. Bitter. Familiar. Comforting. 2 weeks after the trial ended, the phone rang at 9. Mr. Sterling. Harrison. We have the verdict. I sat down, the infinite ocean stretching out before me. The judge ruled in your favor. Total victory. Clear and convincing evidence of elder exploitation, attempted financial fraud, and intentional infliction of emotional distress was found. Judgment for $350,000 plus court costs, $75,000 in punitive damages, $425,000 total. The number seemed abstract. There's more, Harrison continued. Permanent restraining order. They are prohibited from contacting you directly or indirectly. No calls. No letters. No communications through third parties. Violation results in contempt charges. And the payment? They have nothing. Court-ordered payment plan. Garnishment of future wages until the debt is settled could take years. But the judgment is public record. Searchable permanent documentation of what they attempted. That's what I wanted. Not the money. Documentation. Validation. Public record that I wasn't paranoid or cruel. That I was the victim of an attack. And I had every right to defend myself. Thank you, Harrison, for everything. You did the work. I just legalized it. After hanging up, I sat watching the sunrise. The written opinion arrived by email an hour later. I read every page. Judge Hastings wrote, "The evidence presented demonstrates the premeditated exploitation of an elderly person by those in positions of trust. The incident at the restaurant, the attempt to drug someone to facilitate document signing, constitutes a felony in itself. Subsequent surveillance recordings reveal ongoing manipulation and planning. This court finds the defendant's actions reprehensible and deserving of the maximum civil sanctions." Reprehensible. Maximum penalty. Public document. I printed the opinion and filed it. One more document in a case now closed. On August 16th, I closed on the sale of the Coral Gables house. Sold to a young family for $2.75 million. They will never know what happened within those walls. They will fill it with different memories, different lives, different futures. That same day, I bought a downtown apartment. 10th floor. Floor-to-ceiling windows. Ocean views to the horizon. $850,000 cash purchase from the house sale. Modern. Impeccable. No history. I moved in on August 18th. Furniture arrived and was simply placed. Nothing excessive. Nothing unnecessary. The space felt like taking a breath after being underwater. August 20th. Last meeting with Veronica in her Pinewood office. The certification still hung on the wall. Case closed, she said, handing me a USB drive. All the surveillance recordings, reports, and documentation. Go on the record that I thank you for everything. You made it easy. They were predictable. She stood and extended her hand. Take care. Mr. Sterling. We shook hands. The matter concluded. The professional relationship was over. On August 22nd, I sat on my new balcony, phone in hand. I searched for Elena's contact, my finger hovering over the screen. Delete contact. A confirmation box popped up. I pressed yes. Her name vanished. Julian's followed. Both disappeared from my phone, from my life, from my future. The restraining order legally barred them from communication. Even if they wanted to apologize, reconcile, or explain, the law prevented it. 3 years minimum. Enough time for life to move on without them. I felt nothing. Neither satisfaction nor sadness. Just a serene peace. On August 23rd and 24th, I established new routines. Coffee on the balcony in the morning. Walks by the sea in the afternoon. Reading at night with the sound of the ocean drifting through the open windows. I called old friends I had neglected during the chaos. Made lunch plans. Reconnected. And rebuilt my social life outside of surveillance and legal battles. On August 25th, the sunset painted the sky in layers. Orange blending into purple. Then deep blue. I stood on my balcony, coffee cooling in my hand, watching the day turn into night. 6 months since February. Since that restaurant. Since Matteo's warning. The glass switch. And everything that followed. I protected my assets through the trust. Evicted them from my house. Held them accountable with a civil judgment. And put their exploitation on public record. I won. But it didn't feel like victory. It felt like survival. Like emerging from dark waters and realizing I was still breathing. My daughter had tried to poison me. That truth weighed on me. Unchangeable. But I refused to be a victim. I refused to accept the manipulation. I refused to let trust make me vulnerable to destruction. The ocean stretched infinitely. The horizon line crisp and defined. Somewhere in the city behind me, Elena and Julian lived with the consequences. A court debt that would follow them for years. A public record that affected their job applications and background checks. A restraining order that prevented them from spinning their story or seeking reconciliation on their own terms. I didn't hate them. Hate required energy, attention, emotional dedication, all that I had dedicated to documentation, preparation, and legal battles. Now I only had peace. The sun touched the horizon. The colors deepened, and the city lights began to twinkle behind me. My coffee was cold, but I didn't move to refill it. I simply stood there, watching the cycle of nature continue, oblivious to human drama. I built an empire from nothing, sold it for $30 million, protected $25 million through an unshakable trust, lost a daughter, but saved myself. I found justice in the courts, and peace in separation. Some stories end with family reunions, forgiveness, and healing. This one ended with distance, documentation, and the relief of being safe. The sun disappeared behind the ocean, darkness settling around me. I finished my cold coffee, left the cup on the balcony railing, and watched the stars appear. Tomorrow I would call my former partner about that consulting opportunity. Next week, I would have lunch with friends. Eventually, I would date, travel, and fill my days with something other than litigation. But tonight I simply stood here, free, protected, alone, but not lonely. The ocean whispered against the shore below. The city hummed with its infinite rhythm. Life went on, indifferent to individual struggles, offering new days to those who survived old battles. I had survived, and that was enough. If you liked this story, please hit like on this video, subscribe to the channel, and share your thoughts in the comments. To hear the next story, click on the box to the left. Thank you for watching.